My best friend joined me in the photo booth at a wedding. I wasn't ready for the last picture. The flash went off, and for a second, I thought I had finally captured the happiest moment of my life. My best friend was standing beside me, laughing like she always did, her shoulder pressed against mine inside a tiny wedding photo booth. We had already taken 3 ridiculous pictures, and I was reaching for the button to take one more when she suddenly looked at me with tears in her eyes. She leaned closer, took my hand, and whispered something that made my heart stop. Then the camera flashed one final time. I didn't know it then, but that last picture would become the most important photograph I had ever owned. If you believe that kindness can change someone's life, that second chances are real, and that sometimes the person standing beside us has been loving us quietly all along, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes, the greatest love stories don't begin with a confession. They begin with years of friendship, 1,000 small acts of kindness, and one moment when someone finally finds the courage to stop hiding their heart. My name is Daniel, and for most of my life, I had been terrified of losing people. I grew up in a small apartment with my mother, who worked 2 jobs after my father left. She taught me that people didn't always stay, no matter how much you loved them. So I learned to keep my expectations low. I became the kind of person who would rather help everyone else than admit when I needed help myself. I could carry someone's boxes, listen to their problems at 3 in the morning, fix a broken shelf, drive someone across town, or sit beside them in silence for hours. But if anyone asked what I wanted, I never had an answer. Then I met Emily. We were 19 when we became friends, sitting beside each other in a college lecture after both arriving late. She accidentally dropped her notebook on my shoes, apologized 3 times, and somehow spent the rest of the semester making me laugh. Emily had this strange ability to make ordinary moments feel important. A rainy afternoon became an adventure. A cheap cup of coffee became a celebration. Even waiting for the bus could become something worth remembering. We became inseparable. People constantly assumed we were dating. We always laughed it off. Emily would roll her eyes and tell everyone that I was like her annoying brother. I would pretend to be offended and tell her that she was the reason I had trust issues. Then we'd laugh until our stomachs hurt. But somewhere along the way, my feelings changed. I never told her. I was afraid. Emily was the one person in my life I couldn't imagine losing. If she rejected me, I could survive the embarrassment. But if telling her destroyed our friendship, I didn't know if I could survive that. So I watched her date other people. I listened when she told me about the man she met at a coffee shop. I helped her choose outfits for dates. I answered her late-night calls when relationships ended badly. Every time she cried on my shoulder, a tiny part of me hoped she would someday look up and realize I was there. But she never did. Or at least, that's what I believed. The wedding was for Emily's older sister, Sarah. I had known Sarah for nearly as long as I'd known Emily, so there was no question that I would be there. Emily arrived wearing a dark green dress that made the entire room seem to disappear around her. I remember staring for half a second too long before pretending I was looking at the decorations. She caught me. She smiled. I looked away. The reception was beautiful. Golden lights hung from the ceiling, music filled the room, and everyone seemed determined to celebrate as if nothing bad had ever happened in the world. I tried to enjoy myself, but something felt strange. Earlier that week, Emily had told me she had something important to tell me after the wedding. She refused to say what it was. I had spent 4 days imagining every possible explanation. Maybe she was moving. Maybe she had gotten engaged. Maybe she was leaving the city. Or maybe she had finally met someone. That last possibility hurt more than the others. Around midnight, the photographer announced that the photo booth was open. Guests immediately crowded around it. People put on ridiculous hats, oversized glasses, fake mustaches, and feather boas. Emily grabbed my wrist. She pulled me toward the booth. I laughed as she dragged me inside, telling me that we needed proof that we had survived another family wedding together. The first picture showed us smiling normally. The second had Emily wearing a ridiculous pair of heart-shaped glasses while I pretended to look horrified. For the third, she kissed my cheek. I froze. The camera flashed. She laughed so hard that she nearly fell over. I tried to hide how much that little kiss affected me. Then the screen counted down for the fourth picture. 3, 2, 1. Emily stopped smiling. She looked directly at me. The camera flashed, but neither of us posed. Instead, she reached for my hand. Her fingers were trembling. I remember feeling my heart pounding so hard that I could hear it. She stared at me for several seconds, and then she whispered the words I'd spent years secretly wishing to hear. She told me she had loved me for a long time. I couldn't breathe. For a moment, I thought I'd misunderstood her. Then she explained everything. She told me she'd known about my feelings years earlier. Not because I'd confessed, but because people aren't as good at hiding love as they think. She had noticed the way I looked at her when I thought she wasn't watching. She remembered every time I showed up when she needed someone. Every birthday gift I'd carefully chosen. Every late-night drive. Every time I had pretended not to be jealous when she talked about another man. But she had been afraid too. She had been afraid that if she admitted her feelings and I didn't feel the same way, our friendship would disappear. So we had spent years protecting something we were both terrified to lose. She started crying. And then she told me why she had waited until that night. Her father had recently been diagnosed with a serious illness. The doctors had discovered something that required immediate treatment, and Sarah's wedding had been one of the few happy events their family had experienced in months. Emily said the situation had forced her to stop postponing the things that mattered. She didn't want to reach a day when she realized she had spent her entire life being afraid to tell someone how much they meant to her. I looked at her and realized something painful. I had spent years doing exactly the same thing. The camera began counting down again. 3, 2, 1. Emily leaned her forehead against mine. The flash went off. That was the last picture. Neither of us smiled. We simply stood there holding hands, both crying, with the wedding lights glowing behind us. When we stepped out of the booth, we didn't immediately tell anyone. We walked outside. The music became distant behind the closed doors. The night air was cool, and the parking lot was nearly empty. Emily sat on the hood of my car, and I stood beside her. For the first time in years, there was nothing left to hide. I told her everything. I told her how many times I'd almost confessed. How many nights I'd convinced myself that friendship was enough. How many times I'd watched her leave with someone else and smiled while my heart broke quietly. She cried again. Then she laughed. She told me I was an idiot. I told her she was worse. And somehow, after all those years, we finally kissed. It wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks. No music. No crowd cheering. Just two people who had spent years standing inches away from what they wanted, finally taking one small step toward it. But our story wasn't suddenly perfect. The following months were difficult. Emily's father's health became worse. Hospital visits replaced weekend outings. There were days when she barely had the energy to talk. I wanted to fix everything, but I learned that love isn't always about fixing things. Sometimes it's about sitting beside someone when nothing can be fixed. I stayed. I drove her to appointments. I brought food when she forgot to eat. I sat with her family in hospital waiting rooms. And Emily stayed beside me too. She taught me that being loved didn't mean I had to be strong all the time. When I finally broke down one evening, she held me and reminded me that I didn't always have to carry everything alone. Months passed. Her father eventually stabilized enough to return home. It wasn't the ending anyone had hoped for, but it was enough to give the family another chance at ordinary days. And ordinary days became precious. Emily and I continued taking pictures. But none of them meant as much as the one from the wedding. Years later, that photograph still sits inside a wooden frame in our living room. The picture is imperfect. My eyes are red from crying. Emily's hair is slightly messy. We're both looking terrified. But our hands are intertwined. Sometimes people ask why we chose that photograph instead of one where we were smiling. The answer is simple. Because that was the moment our lives changed. It wasn't the picture of two people who had everything figured out. It was the picture of two scared people finally choosing honesty over fear. The funny thing is, I used to believe the most important moments in life would be loud. I thought love would arrive with certainty. I thought happiness would feel obvious. But now I understand that the most important moments can be incredibly quiet. A hand reaching for yours. A friend deciding to stay. A confession whispered inside a photo booth. A camera flashing at exactly the right moment. And sometimes, the person you've been waiting for isn't someone you have to find. Sometimes they're already sitting beside you. Sometimes they've been laughing at your stupid jokes for years. Sometimes they've been standing next to you through every heartbreak, every bad decision, every failure, and every victory. And sometimes, all it takes is one brave moment to realize that the love you've been searching for has been there all along. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who might need to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue creating stories about kindness, courage, friendship, and second chances. And before you go, I want you to leave one special comment. I choose courage over fear. Because you never know how many beautiful moments you're missing simply because you're afraid to say what your heart has been trying to tell you. As for me, I still have that final photo. Every time I look at it, I remember the person I used to be, the man who was terrified of losing his best friend. And then I look at Emily beside me. I realize I didn't lose her. I finally stopped being afraid enough to let myself love her. And that tiny photo booth, hidden in the corner of a crowded wedding reception, gave me something I never expected. It gave me the last picture of the life I had been living. And the first picture of the life I was finally brave enough to begin.